Picture this: a bustling downtown restaurant, alive with the kind of energy that makes your heart race. Laughter fills the air, glasses clink in celebration, and the soft hum of background music weaves through the chatter like a warm embrace. Golden fairy lights dangle from the ceiling, casting a magical glow over the long dining table where my coworkers and I are gathered. Tonight is supposed to be my night, a night I've dreamed of for 5 long years. I'm Kathy, and for half a decade, I've poured my heart and soul into this company. Late nights, endless problem solving, mentoring new hires even when it wasn't my job. I did it all. My boss, Richard, had been dropping hints for months. Kathy, you're next in line for senior manager. And tonight, at this very party, my promotion was supposed to be announced. I could already hear the applause, feel the pride, the validation of every sacrifice I'd made. I adjusted the hem of my navy blue dress, my heart pounding with anticipation. But what happened next? It turned my world upside down in ways I never could have imagined. Hey there, America! Welcome to Destiny Rewritten, the channel where we dive deep into stories of betrayal, resilience, and the unstoppable power to rewrite your own future. I'm Kathy, your storyteller for today, and I'm here to take you on a wild ride that starts with one of the most humiliating moments of my life and ends with a triumph that'll leave you cheering. If you've ever been overlooked, undervalued, or stabbed in the back by someone you trusted, this story is for you. I'm talking to all the hard workers out there, the ones who've given their all only to be pushed aside for someone new. Maybe you're in a dead-end job right now, feeling like your efforts don't matter. Or maybe you've been passed over for a promotion you deserved. Trust me, I've been there, and I know how it feels. But here's the thing. This video isn't just a story, it's a roadmap. It's packed with drama, jaw-dropping twists, and lessons that could change the way you see your own life. But I've got to warn you, you have to stick around until the very end. Why? Because what I did after that night will leave you speechless. I turned a moment of heartbreak into a life-changing victory, and I'm here to show you how I rewrote my destiny, and how you can too. This video is loaded with insights, real-life examples, and hard-earned wisdom, so don't miss a single second. Grab a cup of coffee, get comfy, and let's dive into this roller coaster of a story. Oh, and before we start, do me a favor, hit that like button, drop a comment with your own story of betrayal, and make sure you're subscribed to Destiny Rewritten with the notification bell on. We've got a community here that's all about transformation and empowerment, and I want you to be a part of it. Let's get started. Trust me, you won't want to miss this. The night that changed everything. The atmosphere in the restaurant was electric. It was one of those upscale venues downtown with high ceilings, modern decor, and a vibe that screamed celebration. My team had gathered to mark the company's quarterly success, but for me, this night held a deeper meaning. For 5 years, I had been the backbone of our department. I was the one who stayed late to fix last-minute crises, the one who took on projects no one else wanted, the one who trained new hires and helped them navigate the chaos of our fast-paced office. I wasn't just a team player, I was the glue that held everything together. And Richard, my boss, knew it. Over the past few months, he'd been dropping hints about my future at the company. "Kathy, you're doing amazing work," he'd say with a knowing smile. "The senior manager position is opening up soon, and you're at the top of the list." I believed him. Why wouldn't I? I had earned it. I had sacrificed weekends, missed family events, and even put my personal life on hold to make sure the company thrived. I wasn't just hoping for this promotion, I deserved it. So, when Richard announced a celebration party, I knew what was coming. He'd even pulled me aside a week earlier saying, "Kathy, make sure you're there. It's going to be a big night for you." I spent days preparing, picking out the perfect navy blue dress, practicing my acceptance speech in the mirror, imagining the look on my coworkers' faces when Richard called my name. I could already hear the applause, feel the weight of the moment as I stepped into the role I'd worked so hard for. The night of the party arrived, and I walked into the restaurant feeling on top of the world. My team was in high spirits, laughing and toasting to our recent successes. I took my seat at the long dining table, surrounded by familiar faces, some I'd mentored, others I'd worked alongside for years. At the head of the table, Richard stood, his presence commanding as always. He clinked his wineglass with a fork, signaling for attention. The room quieted, and my heart began to race. This was it. "Tonight," Richard began, his deep voice carrying over the chatter, "I want to take a moment to recognize someone truly exceptional, someone who has shown incredible dedication, drive, and talent in just a short time here at the company. It's rare to find someone who can make such an impact in only 3 months." My smile faltered. 3 months? I'd been here for 5 years. My mind raced, trying to make sense of his words. Maybe he'd misspoken. Maybe he meant to say 5 years. But then, Richard turned to my coworker, Lisa, the fresh hire who'd only joined the company 3 months ago. "Lisa," he continued, "you've exceeded all our expectations. Your leadership, creativity, and problem-solving skills have impressed us all, which is why I'm thrilled to officially announce your promotion to senior manager. Congratulations." The room erupted in applause. I sat frozen, my fingers clenched around the stem of my champagne glass, my throat tightening as if someone had just squeezed the air out of my lungs. I forced a smile onto my face, clapping along with the others as Lisa stood, blushing, and graciously accepted her new title. But inside, my world was tilting. This couldn't be happening. Richard turned to me, almost as an afterthought, his grin wide and oblivious. "And of course, Kathy," he said, "you've been such a valuable member of the team. We appreciate everything you do." That was it. A hollow acknowledgement. A pat on the back after 5 years of blood, sweat, and tears. I swallowed the lump in my throat, my smile widening even as my chest tightened. "Of course, Lisa absolutely deserves it," I said, lifting my glass in a toast. Richard nodded approvingly. "She does a lot more than you already, Kathy. You should take notes." Laughter filled the room. Lisa giggled awkwardly, muttering, "Oh, I wouldn't say that." But the words were already out there, hanging in the air like a slap across my face. I laughed along with them. What else could I do? Cry? Beg? Ask him why he'd strung me along for months, only to humiliate me in front of everyone I'd worked with for years? I lifted my glass to my lips and took a slow sip, the champagne tasting bitter on my tongue. As the night went on, I smiled, I chatted, I celebrated, but inside, a storm was brewing. I kept replaying Richard's words in my head. "She does a lot more than you already. 5 years of dedication, and he thought a 3-month newbie had outdone me?" The betrayal stung deeper than I could have imagined. Have you ever been in a situation where you felt completely overlooked, like all your hard work meant nothing? How did you handle it? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. But here's the thing about storms. They don't just destroy. They clear the way for something new. That night, as I stepped outside into the cool night air, I pulled out my phone. My fingers trembled slightly as I composed a short, simple email to HR. Subject: Resignation Letter, Submission. Dear Richard, please find my official resignation letter attached, effective immediately. Best, Kathy. I hesitated for only a second before hitting send. As soon as the email left my outbox, I took a deep breath. For the first time in years, I felt something unexpected. Relief. But I wasn't done yet. On Monday, Richard was about to find out exactly what happens when you underestimate the wrong person. The decision that changed my life. Walking away from that party, I felt a mix of emotions I couldn't quite untangle. There was anger, of course. Anger at Richard for betraying me, for making me believe I was valued only to discard me like I was nothing. There was hurt, a deep, aching hurt, that came from realizing the past 5 years of my life had been built on a lie. But beneath all of that, there was something else, a quiet, burning resolve. I wasn't going to let this moment define me. I wasn't going to let Richard's betrayal be the end of my story. I've always believed that life gives us moments, pivotal moments, that test who we are and what we're made of. This was one of those moments for me. I could have gone home that night, cried into a pint of ice cream, and let the bitterness consume me. I could have stayed at the company, swallowed my pride, and kept working under a boss who clearly didn't respect me. But I didn't. Instead, I chose to take control. I chose to rewrite my destiny. As I stood outside the restaurant, the cool night air brushing against my skin, I thought about all the times I'd gone above and beyond for that company. I remembered the late nights I'd spent fixing reports that were due the next morning, the weekends I'd sacrificed to meet deadlines, the countless times I'd taken on extra responsibilities because I believed in the company's mission. I thought about the junior employees I'd mentored, like Sarah, who came to me on her first day, nervous and unsure, and how I'd spent months guiding her until she became one of the best performers on our team. I thought about the clients I'd saved, the projects I'd turned around, the countless ways I'd proven my worth. And for what? For a pat on the back and a humiliating take notes comment in front of everyone? No, I deserved better, and I was going to make sure I got it. That night, as I sent my resignation email, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. But I knew this was just the beginning. I wasn't just walking away from a job. I was walking away from a chapter of my life that had defined me for too long. And I was determined to write a new chapter, one where I was in control of my own story. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I knew I couldn't stay in a place that didn't value me, but I also knew I couldn't just walk away without a plan. I needed to figure out my next step. That's when I remembered Andrew Carter. Andrew had been the CFO at our company a year ago. He was one of the most brilliant minds I'd ever worked with, sharp, strategic, and deeply respected by everyone in the office. But he and Richard had clashed too many times. Richard, with his ego and need for control, couldn't handle someone as competent as Andrew challenging his decisions. So he forced Andrew out, thinking he was replaceable. I remember the day Andrew left. He'd pulled me aside, shaken my hand, and said, "Kathy, you're one of the best people here. If I ever start something new, I'd love to have you on my team." At the time, I'd smiled and thanked him, but I didn't think much of it. I was loyal to the company, and I believed my hard work would pay off. But a few months ago, Andrew had reached out to me. He told me he was starting his own firm, Carter and Associates, and he wanted me to join as the director of operations, a role far above the senior manager position I'd been chasing. I'd turned him down, not because I didn't want the job, but because I still believed in Richard's promises. I thought my loyalty would be rewarded. How wrong I'd been. That Saturday morning, I pulled up Andrew's email from my inbox. My hands were steady as I typed out a message. "Andrew, I hope you're doing well. I've been thinking about your offer, and I'd like to discuss it further. Are you free to talk this weekend? Best, Kathy." Within an hour, Andrew replied, "Kathy, I'm thrilled to hear from you. Let's talk tomorrow at 10 a.m. I'll send you a Zoom link." The next day, I sat down for the call with Andrew. He looked the same as I remembered, confident, professional, but with a warmth that Richard had always lacked. "Kathy," he said, smiling through the screen, "I'm so glad you reached out." I meant what I said. You're one of the best people I've ever worked with. The director of operations role is still yours if you want it. I took a deep breath. "Andrew, I'm in. But I need to know, what's your vision for Carter and Associates? I'm not just looking for a job. I want to be part of something meaningful." Andrew's smile widened. "That's exactly why I want you on board. We're building a company that values talent, innovation, and integrity. No politics, no games, just a team of people working together to create something extraordinary. You'd be leading operations, overseeing our growth, and helping us build a culture that puts people first. I know you've been through a lot at your current company, but I promise you this will be different." His words resonated with me. For the first time in years, I felt seen. I felt valued. "I'm ready," I said. "Let's do this." We spent the next hour discussing the details, my start date, my salary, which was significantly higher than what I'd been earning, and the vision for the company. By the end of the call, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: excitement. I was stepping into a new chapter, one where I could finally be the architect of my own destiny. But before I could fully embrace my new beginning, I had one last thing to do. I needed to face Richard one more time, not for closure, but to show him that I wasn't the same Kathy he'd underestimated. What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have stayed or walked away like I did? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm curious to hear what you think. The confrontation. Monday morning arrived, and I walked into the office with a quiet confidence I hadn't felt in years. The receptionist greeted me with a hesitant smile, her eyes flickering with curiosity. My co-workers were gathered near the break room, chatting over their morning coffee, but the air felt different, charged with an unspoken tension. Lisa was already at her desk, basking in the afterglow of her new role as senior manager. I wasn't angry at Lisa. She hadn't done anything wrong. The real problem sat in the corner office. The man who'd lied to me for months, making me believe I was valued, only to discard me like I was nothing. I took my time settling in, placing my bag beside my desk and booting up my computer. I wanted Richard to come to me, and right on cue, his office door swung open. "Kathy, my office, now." The entire floor went silent. People exchanged nervous glances. No one had ever heard Richard sound like that before. Urgent, confused, desperate. I stood up slowly, smoothed my blouse, and walked into his office. The door clicked shut behind me. Richard was already seated at his desk, my resignation letter printed out in front of him. He looked up, his eyes scanning my face as if trying to figure out whether this was a joke. "You're leaving?" he asked, his voice incredulous. "Yes," I said, sitting down and folding my hands in my lap. "Effective immediately." "But why? This is so sudden. We didn't discuss this." I let out a soft laugh. "We didn't discuss Lisa's promotion either, but here we are." His jaw tightened. "Kathy, that wasn't personal. She just outperformed you." "She's been here for 3 months," I said, tilting my head. "But sure, if that's what you believe." Richard leaned forward, his tone softening. "You know I appreciate you, right? You've been such an important part of this company for 5 years. I don't want to lose you." I stared at him, taking in the sheer audacity of his words. "You don't want to lose me," I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "But you had no problem overlooking me for a promotion I worked years for. You had no problem laughing when I was humiliated at my own celebration party. And you had no problem telling me to take notes from someone who just got here." His expression shifted, his usual smug confidence beginning to crack. "Look," he said, running a hand through his hair, "maybe I made a mistake. Maybe I should have handled it differently. But resigning out of nowhere? This isn't the right move, Kathy. You're making an emotional decision." I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I sent that email on Friday night, Richard. If this was just emotion, I would have stormed out that same evening, but I didn't. I planned this, and I'm leaving on my terms." "So what's your plan?" he asked, his voice sharp now. "Go to one of our competitors? Because I have to remind you, Kathy, we have non-compete agreements." I laughed. "Oh, I don't need to go to a competitor." He frowned. "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath, relishing the moment. "Do you remember Andrew Carter, the CFO you let go last year?" Richard tensed. Of course he remembered. Andrew had been one of the company's most valuable executives, but he and Richard had clashed too many times. Richard forced him out, thinking he was replaceable. "Andrew reached out to me a few months ago," I continued. "He's starting his own firm, Carter and Associates, and he wanted me to lead the operations department, a director-level position. I turned him down at first. I was loyal to this company." I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice. "But Friday night changed everything. I called him right after I left the party, and he made the offer again. I accepted." Silence. Pure, unfiltered shock. Richard stared at me like he was trying to process the information. "You're leaving for Andrew's company?" he finally said, his voice tight. "I start next Monday," I confirmed. He opened his mouth, closed it, then exhaled sharply. "Kathy, be reasonable. This company has been your home for 5 years. We can work something out." "I don't want to talk," I interrupted smoothly. "This decision is final." He clenched his jaw. "You won't be able to come back." I smiled. "I won't need to." I turned, walking to the door. Just before I stepped out, I paused. "You know, Richard," I said over my shoulder, "it's funny how you only realize someone's worth when they walk away." Then I walked out, closing the door behind me, leaving him alone with the consequences of his actions, and it felt amazing. The aftermath, and my new beginning. As I stepped out of Richard's office, I could feel all eyes on me. The open workspace had gone eerily silent, the usual Monday morning chatter replaced by a thick tension in the air. My coworkers weren't even pretending to work anymore. Heads peeked over cubicle walls, eyes darted away the second I met their gaze. They knew something had happened, and in a matter of minutes, they were going to know exactly what. I returned to my desk with a serene calmness, opening my email and forwarding my resignation letter to the entire leadership team. Subject: Official resignation notice. Effective immediately, I am stepping down from my position at the company. It has been an experience I will not forget. Best, Kathy. Simple, professional, but the underlying message was clear. I was done. A few seconds later, the first whisper spread through the floor, then another, then another. The wildfire had begun. I didn't have to wait long before someone approached me. Kathy, is it true? I turned to see Rachel, one of the few people I actually trusted in this place. She looked stunned. I nodded, giving her a small smile. Yeah, it's time for me to move on. She exhaled sharply, shaking her head. Wow, just wow. I mean, I get it. Everyone here knows you deserve that promotion. Even Lisa sitting at her desk looked conflicted. She stood up, hesitating. Kathy, I didn't know. I raised an eyebrow. Didn't know what? Her mouth opened, then closed. She knew, of course. She might not have orchestrated it, but she'd benefited from my loss. It's fine, Lisa, I said, not unkindly. Enjoy the promotion. She flinched, but I was already stepping into the elevator. As the doors slid shut, I let out a slow breath. This wasn't just the end. It was the beginning. The Monday after I walked out, I stood in front of a sleek glass building, Carter and Associates, Andrew's new firm. It was smaller than my old company, but it pulsed with energy and ambition, a place where people were building something new, not just maintaining someone else's machine. I stepped through the doors, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Excitement. No more being overlooked. No more being undervalued. No more Richard. My new office had floor-to-ceiling windows and a door I could actually close. During my first leadership meeting, Andrew turned to me, smiling. Kathy, I want you to take the lead on our new initiative. We're restructuring operations, and with your experience, you're the best person for it. Just like that. No begging, no proving my worth over and over. They already knew my value. I'd love to, I said simply. My new colleagues smiled in approval. This was how things should be. No games, no politics, just respect. But back at my old company, things were falling apart. 2 days after I left, my phone buzzed with a message from Rachel. Kathy, OMG, Richard is losing it. Ever since you left, everything's a mess. I smirked, reading on. He had to call an emergency meeting because no one knows how to handle half the things you used to do. Turns out Lisa doesn't actually do more than you. She doesn't even know what she's doing. I laughed out loud. Of course, Richard had overestimated Lisa's abilities and underestimated mine. Another message came in. 3 clients already reached out, asking for you by name. When they found out you left, they weren't happy. A rush of satisfaction washed over me. Richard had spent years taking me for granted, and now he was learning a hard lesson. Some people aren't replaceable. I'd been the one keeping things running smoothly, managing client relationships, streamlining operations, and making sure deadlines were met. Without me, the cracks in the company's foundation were starting to show. That afternoon, while reviewing strategy documents in my new office, my assistant poked her head in. Kathy, you have a call on line 1. It's Dawson and Company. They said they used to work with you and want to discuss moving their account over. Dawson and Company was one of the biggest clients at my old company. I'd worked with them for years, building a relationship based on trust and reliability. Put them through, I said, keeping my voice steady, even though my heart was pounding. A moment later, I heard the familiar voice of Mark Dawson, the CEO. Kathy, he said, warmth in his tone. I heard you moved to Carter and Associates. Let's talk. I leaned back in my chair, a slow smile spreading across my face. Of course, Mark. What can I do for you? Within a week, 3 of my former company's biggest clients had reached out, all expressing the same frustration. Things aren't the same since you left. We don't feel like we're in good hands anymore. One by one, they moved to Carter and Associates, not because I stole them, but because they trusted me, not the company I used to work for. Stories of resilience, learning from others. As I settled into my new role at Carter and Associates, I couldn't help but reflect on how this moment of betrayal had become a turning point in my life. It wasn't just about leaving a toxic workplace, it was about realizing my own worth and taking control of my future. But I also realized I wasn't alone in this journey. Over the years, I'd met so many people who'd faced similar betrayals and turned their pain into power. As I processed my own experience, I couldn't help but think of others who'd been through the same kind of heartbreak and came out stronger on the other side. Their stories inspired me, and I want to share a few of them with you now because I believe they hold lessons we can all learn from. Maria's journey from rejection to reinvention. Let me tell you about Maria, a woman I met at a networking event a few years ago. Maria had been a graphic designer at a mid-sized marketing firm in Chicago for nearly a decade. She was the go-to person for every major project, often working overtime to meet tight deadlines and delivering designs that consistently wowed clients. Her boss, a woman named Claire, always praised her work in private, telling her she was on track to become the creative director. Maria lived for those words. She'd spent years building her portfolio, taking on extra work, and even teaching herself new design software to stay ahead of the curve. She'd sacrificed family time, turned down social invitations, and poured every ounce of her creativity into her job, all because she believed her hard work would pay off. But when the creative director position finally opened up, Claire called a team meeting to announce the new appointee. Maria sat in the front row, her heart racing with anticipation. She'd prepared a vision board for the role, outlining her ideas for the team's future, and she couldn't wait to share it. But then Claire said, "I'm excited to announce that Ethan, our newest designer, will be stepping into the role of creative director. Ethan brings a fresh perspective to the team, and we're excited to see where he takes us." Maria felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. Ethan had only been with the company for 6 months. He'd barely had time to learn the team's workflow, let alone prove himself as a leader. Maria had trained him when he first started, showing him the ropes and helping him navigate the company's design software. And now, he was her boss? Claire didn't even acknowledge Maria's contributions during the meeting, not a single word about her years of dedication. Maria went home that night and cried for hours, her vision board still sitting on her desk, untouched. She felt like a failure, like all her hard work had been for nothing. She questioned everything, her talent, her worth, her place in the industry. But the next morning, as she stared at her tear-streaked reflection in the mirror, something shifted. She wasn't going to let Claire's decision define her. She wasn't going to let this rejection be the end of her story. Maria started looking for new opportunities, and within a month, she landed a freelance contract with a major tech company in Silicon Valley. The project was daunting. She was tasked with redesigning their entire app interface, a job that required long hours and intense creativity. There were nights when she doubted herself, wondering if she'd taken on too much. But she pushed through, pouring her heart into every pixel, every color choice, every detail. When she delivered the final designs, the client was blown away. They called her work revolutionary, and soon she was getting offers from companies all over the world. Today, Maria runs her own design agency, working with clients she never could have dreamed of at her old firm. She's designed campaigns for global brands, won industry awards, and built a team of talented designers who share her vision. When I asked her how she did it, she told me, "That rejection was the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to see my own value and stop waiting for someone else to give me permission to shine. I realized I didn't need Claire's approval. I needed to believe in myself." Maria's story taught me that sometimes the people who overlook us are doing us a favor. They push us to step out of our comfort zones and find opportunities that are far bigger than the ones we thought we wanted. Story 2: James and the Power of Walking Away. Maria's story reminded me of another colleague, James, whose bold decision to walk away showed me the power of taking control of your own path. James was a sales manager in a different department at my old company, and he'd been with the company for 7 years. He was a natural leader, charismatic, hardworking, and always exceeding his targets. Everyone assumed he'd be the next vice president of sales when the position opened up. James had been told for years that he was the top candidate, and he'd even been asked to train new hires, including an external hire named Greg, who'd joined the company with connections to one of the board members. James took his role seriously. He'd spent countless hours mentoring Greg, sharing his best sales strategies, and helping him build relationships with key clients. He thought he was setting Greg up for success as part of the team, not as his future boss. But when the time came for the vice president announcement, Richard called a meeting. James sat there, confident and ready to step into the role he'd been preparing for. But then Richard said, "I'm pleased to announce that Greg will be our new vice president of sales. His industry connections will take us to the next level." James felt like he'd been hit by a freight train. 7 years of exceeding targets, building client relationships, and leading the team to record-breaking sales, and Richard didn't even mention his contributions. The room clapped for Greg, but James couldn't hear it over the sound of his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. He felt a mix of rage and betrayal boiling inside him. He'd given everything to this company, missed his kids' soccer games, worked through holidays, even turned down other job offers because he believed in Richard's promises. And now he'd been passed over for someone who'd only been there a few months, someone he'd trained. Unlike me, James didn't smile or clap. He stood up in the middle of the meeting, his chair scraping loudly against the floor, and walked out. He didn't say a word, he just left, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. At the time, I thought he was being impulsive, but I later learned that James had a plan. He'd been quietly building his own network over the years, keeping in touch with clients, attending industry events, and making connections that Richard never even knew about. James used those contacts to start his own sales consultancy, but the first few months were brutal. He worked out of a tiny home office, cold calling potential clients, and often faced rejection. There were nights when he'd sit at his desk, staring at his laptop, wondering if he'd made a mistake. But he kept going, driven by a fire that Richard's betrayal had ignited in him. Slowly, his persistence paid off. One of his old clients signed on, then another, and within a year, he was working with some of the biggest companies in the industry, earning more than he ever would have as a vice president. When I ran into James at a conference a few years later, he was a different man, confident, successful, and radiating a kind of quiet strength. He told me, "Walking away was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was also the best. I realized I'd been giving my all to a company that didn't care about me. So I decided to give my all to myself instead. That moment of betrayal showed me I was worth more than Richard could ever see." James's story showed me the power of walking away. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is leave a situation that no longer serves you, even if it feels like you're losing everything. Because in reality, you're making space for something so much better. Story 3. Emily's Redemption Through Reinvention. And then there's Emily, a friend from college, whose journey of reinvention gave me the courage to keep going after my own betrayal. Emily had always dreamed of being a journalist. She landed her dream job at a prestigious magazine in New York right after graduation, and for a few years, she thrived. Her articles were insightful, her writing was sharp, and she quickly became known as one of the magazine's rising stars. But when a new editor-in-chief, Laura, took over, everything changed. Laura favored a clique of younger writers, often giving them the best assignments while sidelining Emily. Emily tried to prove herself. She pitched brilliant ideas, worked late to meet deadlines, and even took on extra projects to show her dedication. She'd stay up until 2 a.m., perfecting her articles, hoping Laura would notice her effort. But Laura dismissed her work, saying, "We're looking for a more modern voice." Emily felt invisible, like all her years of hard work were being erased. After 2 years of being overlooked, the final blow came when Laura passed her over for a promotion she'd been promised. The role went to a new writer who'd only been at the magazine for 6 months, a writer who'd once asked Emily for advice on how to pitch stories. Emily was heartbroken, She'd spent her entire career building her reputation at that magazine, and now she felt like she'd been thrown away. She went home that night and sat on her couch, staring at the wall, her dreams in tatters. She thought about all the late nights, the missed opportunities, the times she'd turned down other offers because she believed in the magazine's mission. She felt like a failure, like she'd never be good enough. But as the days passed, a spark of defiance began to grow inside her. She wasn't going to let Laura's rejection define her career. She wasn't going to let this be the end of her story. Emily quit her job and decided to take a leap of faith. She started her own online publication, focusing on the kind of journalism she'd always wanted to do. Deep, investigative pieces that gave a voice to the voiceless. The first year was a struggle. She worked out of her tiny apartment, often for little pay, and there were times when she doubted herself. She'd wake up at 3 a.m., panicked that she'd made a mistake, wondering if she'd ever make it. But she kept going, driven by a passion for storytelling and a determination to prove herself. Slowly, her publication gained traction. Readers loved her authentic, heartfelt stories, and within 3 years, her platform had grown into a respected outlet with a loyal following. Today, Emily's publication is thriving, and she's won several awards for her work, including a prestigious journalism prize that her old magazine had never even been nominated for. When I asked her how she did it, she said, "I realized that I couldn't wait for someone else to give me the opportunities I deserved. I had to create them myself." Leaving that magazine was terrifying, but it was the only way I could take back control of my story. I stopped trying to fit into Laura's idea of a modern voice and started listening to my own. Emily's journey taught me that reinvention isn't just about starting over, it's about creating something better than what you had before. It's about taking the pieces of your broken dreams and building something even more beautiful. These stories, Maria's, James's, and Emily's, reminded me that I wasn't alone in my struggle. Betrayal, rejection, and being overlooked are universal experiences, especially in the workplace. But what sets us apart is how we respond. We can let those moments break us, or we can let them propel us towards something greater. For me, that moment of betrayal at the promotion party was the catalyst I needed to rewrite my destiny. And as I settled into my new role at Carter & Associates, I began to see just how powerful that decision was. What's one moment in your life that made you realize your worth? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear how you turned a setback into a comeback. The consequences of underestimating. Me back at my old company, things were falling apart faster than I could have imagined. Rachel, my former coworker and one of the few people I trusted, kept me updated with a steady stream of messages. "Kathy, OMG, Richard is losing it," she texted me 2 days after I left. "Ever since you resigned, everything's a mess." I smirked, reading on. "He had to call an emergency meeting because no one knows how to handle half the things you used to do. Turns out Lisa doesn't actually do more than you. She doesn't even know what she's doing." I laughed out loud. Of course. Richard had overestimated Lisa's abilities and underestimated mine. Another message came in. "3 clients already reached out, asking for you by name. When they found out you left, they weren't happy." A rush of satisfaction washed over me. Richard had spent years taking me for granted, and now he was learning a hard lesson. Some people aren't replaceable. I'd been the one keeping things running smoothly, managing client relationships, streamlining operations, and making sure deadlines were met. Without me, the cracks in the company's foundation were starting to show. That afternoon, while reviewing strategy documents in my new office at Carter & Associates, my assistant poked her head in. "Kathy, you have a call on line 1. It's Dawson & Company. They said they used to work with you and want to discuss moving their account over." Dawson & Company was one of the biggest clients at my old company. I'd worked with them for years, building a relationship based on trust and reliability. "Put them through," I said, keeping my voice steady even though my heart was pounding. A moment later, I heard the familiar voice of Mark Dawson, the CEO. "Kathy," he said, warmth in his tone. "I heard you moved to Carter & Associates. Let's talk." I leaned back in my chair, a slow smile spreading across my face. "Of course, Mark. What can I do for you?" Within a week, 3 of my former company's biggest clients had reached out, all expressing the same frustration. Things aren't the same since you left. We don't feel like we're in good hands anymore. One by one, they moved to Carter and Associates, not because I stole them, but because they trusted me, not the company I used to work for. Rachel kept feeding me updates. Lisa is drowning. She's not ready for this role at all. I heard Richard yelling at the leadership team in a closed-door meeting. The board is furious about the client losses. Investors aren't happy. I could only imagine the look on Richard's face, the panic, the regret. And the best part? I wasn't even trying to hurt him. I was just thriving somewhere else. That Friday, I got an email from Richard. Subject, a proposal. Kathy, I'd like to have a conversation. I believe we can come to a mutually beneficial arrangement. Let's set up a meeting next week to discuss options. I laughed softly. He was desperate, and for the first time in 5 years, I had all the power. I replied, Richard, I'm available for a brief meeting Monday at 10 a.m. Let me know if that works for you. At 10 a.m. on Monday, I walked back into the familiar glass office building. The receptionist hesitated before greeting me. Employees stole glances as I passed. Richard looked terrible. Dark circles under his eyes, a nervous energy in the way he sat. Thanks for coming in, he said, forcing a tight smile. I sat down, crossing my legs. What's on your mind? He exhaled. I won't waste your time. We need you back, Kathy. I underestimated your role here. I'll admit that. If you return, I'm prepared to offer you a substantial raise, a senior executive title, and full decision-making authority over your department. I let the words hang in the air, heavy with irony. So let me get this straight, I said, raising an eyebrow. You had 5 years to recognize my value, 5 years to promote me, 5 years to respect my work. But instead, you passed me over for someone with 3 months of experience and told me to take notes on how to be better. And now, after losing key clients and watching your company spiral, you're offering me everything I deserved all along? His jaw tightened. Kathy, come on! I held up a hand, stopping him. Let me ask you something. If I never left, would I be sitting here right now? Would you have given me this offer out of appreciation, or are you only doing it now because you're losing control? His silence said everything. I let out a small, amused laugh. That's what I thought. Richard's desperation broke through. Kathy, be smart about this. You have history here, a future. Do you really want to throw away all the hard work you put into this company? I smiled. Richard, you still don't get it, do you? I stood up, smoothing my blazer, and leaned forward slightly. I never needed you. You needed me. And now you're finally realizing that. I turned, walking to the door, but paused just before stepping out. You should take notes, Richard, I said softly, echoing his own words back at him. Maybe next time you'll learn to value the people who actually make your company run. Then I walked out, and this time, I never looked back. A new chapter and lessons learned back at Carter and Associates. Things were thriving. Our client roster nearly doubled as more companies left Richard's sinking ship to join us. A week later, Rachel sent me one final update. Richard just got fired. The board forced him out. They couldn't recover from the client losses. I leaned back in my chair, sipping my coffee, and thought, perfect. Richard had thought I was replaceable. Turns out he was. And me? I'm exactly where I'm meant to be, living proof that you can rewrite your destiny, no matter how many times life tries to tear you down. Here at Destiny Rewritten, we believe that every betrayal, every setback, every moment of heartbreak is a chance to rewrite your story. I took control of my future, and you can too. So, let me leave you with a few lessons I learned along the way. First, know your worth. Don't wait for someone else to validate your value. If you're not being appreciated, find a place that will. Second, don't be afraid to walk away. Leaving a toxic situation is scary, but it's often the first step towards something better. Third, turn pain into power. Use your setbacks as fuel to propel you forward, and let them push you to create a future that's bigger than your past. And finally, bet on yourself. The greatest investment you can make is in your own potential. Believe in your abilities, and don't be afraid to take risks. I'll leave you with a quote that kept me going through this journey. The best revenge is a life well lived. I rewrote my destiny, and I hope this story inspires you to rewrite yours. This video was packed with drama, real-life examples, and hard-earned wisdom. I hope you watched all the way through to catch every detail. If you did, I want to hear from you. What's holding you back from rewriting your own destiny? Have you ever been betrayed at work or faced a moment that made you question your worth? Drop your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and I'd love to connect with you. Your story might just inspire someone else in our Destiny Rewritten community to take that leap of faith they've been waiting for. If this story resonated with you, do me a favor, hit that like button to let me know and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're not already part of our family, what are you waiting for? Subscribe to Destiny Rewritten right now and tap that notification bell so you never miss a story of resilience and transformation. We've got so many more incredible journeys coming your way, and I can't wait to share them with you. Thank you for watching, for being part of this amazing community, and for believing in the power of rewriting your destiny. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, keep chasing your dreams, and never let anyone tell you you're not enough. You've got this.